So Stan, thank you for meeting with us today. Really appreciate your time away from your busy schedule to speak with us today. I'm really excited for this one because we kind of talked already a little bit and you gave me a bit of an overview as to what you got going on, and it sounds motivating, very exciting, very interesting stuff that y'all got going on. So I'm excited to deep dive into it today and learn more about you, learn more about your company. So for the audience, this is Stan Golubchik. He is CEO of ContraForce, which is a startup. You still call it a startup, right? It's still
it's gonna be a startup for a long time, honestly. Yeah.
I'd rather just have you, give us a little bit of overview. Who are you?
Yeah.
What have you been up to? What's your background and what do you got going on with ContraForce?
Yeah, no, absolutely. First of all, Jonathan, great to be here. Thanks for your time. Yeah, we've already, like you said, had some really good conversations. So some of them we've definitely said, let's just wait before we go too deep into it. So I think I'm pretty excited to kind of dive into some of these topics and discuss this, especially with somebody who really gets the space that we're mutually in within cybersecurity and cloud. Introduce myself really quickly. I think you already set up the stage quite well. Stan Golubchik, CEO, founder of ContraForce. Started the business actually about 3 years ago. I've been in the space in cybersecurity IT for coming into about 17 years. Funny enough, my background actually before going into IT head on was not in IT. It was actually in medicine, it was biology. Oh, wow. So I actually focused on pre-med through college. Just an overall love of like biological systems, trying to help people. It's just fascinating for me. So it's still like a huge passion for me. But going through that whole place through pre-med, I definitely noticed that it was not going to be the long-term strategy or career path for me. But if I take a step back really quickly, my story started actually, and I like to kind of just give some context on how we started as a family here. So we actually immigrated from Uzbekistan. It was a actual Soviet Union country back in '89 when we left. So we actually left as, my parents left the whole country as religious refugees. Me, my sister, my parents, and they just dropped everything, they left, and they came over here, literally chasing the proverbial American dream. So they came to Dallas in '89. I was only 2, so I don't really remember much, but I was really early on exposed to just programming, hardware on the computer side, on the PC side. My dad started a business with 2 of his business partners selling motherboards and memory, Kingston memory. So that was like in the .com boom, right before that whole thing exploded. So I remember early days, I was 6 years old, actually working in a warehouse at times, sitting there probably because I wasn't doing too well in school and trying to help package up like Kingston memory and all this stuff. So that goes way back into like the MS-DOS days. And then my mom was actually, she's been a programmer for nearly retired for 30 years actually. So it was always kind of—
It just runs in the family.
It runs in the family, man, yeah. And
it was meant to be.
Yeah, and I love the space.
You tried to run away.
I tried it. It pulled me back in. It didn't work. So yeah, it's been a fun journey. I've definitely taken a lot of twists and turns, but in the place where I need to be right now, and we're doing some really exciting things.
That's amazing, man. Yeah. Thank you. Really appreciate you
thanks.
sharing your story with us. That's wow. Like you're coming in from you got the immigration story coming from a hard place. That's amazing that your family was able to get over here, make a life for themselves, and set you up, right?
Yeah,
in order to really be where you're at right now. I would say my family was not immigrants necessarily because I'm Puerto Rican, so we're natural born citizens. Yeah. But it's a similar story, where my parents realized that they were in a place that it wasn't good for me and my siblings, and so they decided to kind of like break that vicious cycle that our family was kind of stuck in for a long time, for generations. Absolutely. Come out here. My dad joined the military. Yeah, it really set me up, to be able to get to where I am. I definitely, I sympathize with that kind of a story. That's amazing, man. In terms of ContraForce itself, can you give us a bit more, of an overview of like the company itself? Like, why did you start it? And like, what does the product look like? What does it even do, right?
Yeah, so it really started, I think it was been an accumulation of industry wisdom, but also experiences that we saw in cybersecurity in general. The things that we're doing today is just not really doing a good job. It's making a very small dent in the overall cyber criminal market. It's actually, I think if you look at gross GDP for the cyber criminal market, it's 3rd in the world behind China and the US. Oh, wow. It's a multi-trillion-dollar economy, and it's only fueling faster and faster every year. But yeah, also the cybersecurity industry in itself is growing as well, right? In terms of products available, we can obviously argue if there's actually the amount of people that we need, but that's a whole different story. But regardless, whatever we're doing, it's not working, right? And so I saw a lot of this happen like in McAfee. I worked with enterprise customers, large system integrators, service providers, hyperscalers, and what we were trying to do is take our security products and make them work for, security operation stacks, make them cloud native, whatever that may be for refactoring those products. Well, the problem was every time we even took these very tangible but enterprise complex tooling, and we built a stack out of them, we'd hand it over to who we thought could actually manage it. Like think of like a large system integrator, Fujitsu, Atos, right? But the thing that always happened was they'd buy these $500,000 to $1 million stacks, and then 3 months later they call us and say, hey, we need your help because we don't know how to really configure it. We don't know how to operationalize it. But they were actually the ones that were the frontline responders doing the security monitoring, detection, and response. Yeah. So a lot of the times is that you have these very complex and strong and powerful tools, but to be able to operationalize them is a hard thing. That all ended up becoming amalgamated when I went to an MDR provider in North Texas, Armor, and learned a lot. Learned a lot what not to do in business, which was, I think, honestly a privilege, but at the same time, I noticed that every MDR provider for the most part out there that's doing managed detection response, helping secure their end clients' digital estate, their data, their infrastructure, it's not really all that it seems to be. Because on the front end, it seems like, hey, the service is there, but on the back end, when you see some of the skeleton crews that are running these service departments, you're just like, wow, there's not a lot of weight behind it. They make some big
promises.
It's a big promise, exactly. So
the folks that are actually doing the work,
Exactly. So really, we saw that as an opportunity because the problem is you have complex tools with not the right people and the right skill set. So we said, how can we take these tools and democratize the operational component of it? We call it democratize security operations. So then when we can package this up into a simple to use software, we can go to these businesses that are protecting most of the backbone of America, right? And any business globally. So those are typically managed service providers, managed security service providers. So give them an operational layer that they can go scale and then secure their clients globally. So that was really, I think, a big predicating driver for us to go build ContraForce.
That's awesome, man. First off, I would say, I think you're definitely 100% right. You know, like security is always a cat and mouse game, right? Like we're always like chasing against, like fighting against the bad guys. And I think that fight's only gonna escalate, especially with, you know, all these AI tools coming out, a lot of it becoming open source, which is wonderful, you know, for those that want to use it for good things, but it's also wonderful for nefarious guys, right?
For sure.
Like, it's only going to become more important, you know, that we be able to conceptualize and wrap our minds around these tools and then actually operationalize, make use of them, and actually deliver like that value, you know, to our end customers, especially managed service providers. So that's a big industry, you know, like many companies, especially like medium-sized firms who don't want to like, you know, invest in like hiring their entire team, right? Like they're outsourcing all of that business to these MSSPs. And so we're essentially making them the link in the chain, right? That like if they mess up, if something goes wrong there,
it's a supply chain risk.
It's just dominoes all the way. I think you've definitely hit on a core need in the industry for sure.
Yeah.
I do want to go back to maybe the early days of the company. You know, just walk us through, you know, what was those first steps like, right? Like, did you maybe like write the first version of the product yourself, or what was those early days like? What was the struggle there? Walk us through.
I'll tell you, there's a lot of struggle. And so I've told a few people, so I'll kind of give you through the full story. So when I was in the previous company before starting ContraForce, the inflection point was actually me being fired. And so that was a very fuel-driven thing for me to do, because before that, actually years, you know, I grew up in a very like entrepreneur family, right? It's like you have this family coming in from a different culture and you come here and you have to figure out how to go make something from nothing. So for me, that was very like familiar. And so I always wanted to do something, but you know, for me, I think cybersecurity was really based off the idea that you need some industry knowledge experience before you really go jump off the deep end, right? Because you need that credibility. I think I was in an incredible state, but the previous company that I was at, long story short, there was a opportunity where a previous executive reached out to me and said, hey, I think I can get some funding if we go start something. And I said, sure, let's do it. What's the plan? Well, we have a call tomorrow with 8 investors. Can you pitch them? I go, I have no idea what we're pitching. We have no idea. We literally have no business. He goes, well, can you put something together? I'm like, sure, okay, I'll do that. So I put something together. The next day, I pitched to these 8 investors, and they loved it. And they said, hey, can you drive out to Louisiana? We want to meet you face to face. This is the program. I go, hell, let's do it. So I went off that path. It really ended up being just a lot of smoke and mirrors, right? Nothing really, you know, permeated or solidified. But as we were kind of going through that process, interesting enough, as we had 4 people involved, 4 partners initially, and 3 of us were going to be like deep into this, right? Like hands-on operators. The 4th, not so much. He wanted to maintain his full-time job. He wanted still a quarter of the company in terms of ownership. So we pushed back and we said, look, we think that that's not really fair. And we're the ones putting all this into the company. We're investing a lot of our time. And we said, we think, we'll drop you down, maybe to, 10%. Which is reasonable and fair. He didn't have any of that. So he came back and he said, look, if you guys are gonna do that, that investor that we're talking to, which was kind of iffy anyways, wishy-washy, he's like, I'm gonna pull that out from you guys.
Oh, wow.
And so we took a moment, we said, look, if you're willing to put the risk, the financial risk of the company at hand because you want a little bit more stake and it's not fair, then we're probably gonna have to part ways. And so sure enough, we parted ways. So the three of us, we got together, we said, hey, the fourth partner, let's get him on the call. And so we scheduled a meeting. One of the guys that we actually are working with, we're no longer working with, he gets on the call. He's literally eating ice cream when the fourth partner gets on the call, just like licking a cone. The guy gets on and he goes, hey, you know what? You're fired. And we're like, wait, what? And so it was just like a really horrible way to handle it. But the whole mess only like perpetuated because then that third partner who said that, long story short as well, he ended up actually getting into legal issues. He got thrown in jail on some federal charges. Long story there, but so anyways, everything kind of just started shedding itself off, right? Like partners that weren't a fit, and then it ended up being me and my CTO kind of as the co-founders. What ended up happening though was after we split ways with that fourth person, we suspect he went to the company that we're working at, said something, and the company came back and said, hey, we did an investigation and now it's time for you to, we're gonna let you go. But there was no evidence. But I took it as a moment to self-reflect and say, look, I've always wanted to go pursue something myself, right? So I can go fight this and keep going that corporate career pathway, or this is a sign for me to go do something myself.
Yeah, see it as an opportunity.
Absolutely, and I looked at it. I mean, I believe luck is evident and it happens, but I think people over-index on luck. I think it's all about, are you prepared when the opportunity actually arises and you seize the opportunity? So for me, I was like, that's exactly what that is. I have no idea what's gonna happen when I take a step through that door, but I'm going through that door and we're gonna find out.
Love it. Yeah, that's actually something that we had in the interview with Nick that we talked about a little bit. Now, there's always that element of luck, but the important piece that not a lot of people talk about is that you have to be ready for the luck when it strikes, right? I have a term for it, and it's kind of cheesy, it's kind of corny, but I call it planned serendipity, where it's like you have to get yourself to the point where you are ready to catch that ball when it comes your way, right?
Absolutely.
If you're waiting for, even if it's just in a career, right? Like you're looking for the promotion, right? And the spot opens up, you have to be the person that's ready, who is the obvious candidate to move into it. If you're not, you can't be mad that they passed up on you because you literally were not prepared, you were not ready for it. And then that extends, I think, also into, as you said, like business and life in general, honestly. But you have to be ready for when the luck strikes.
Oh, I agree.
And be able to like seize that opportunity. I do want to ask, just going kind of back to, your roots and where you came from, I kind of just wanted to ask, do you think that, an immigrant and having to struggle from early on kind of gave you an advantage, as you grew up and as you started to move into the business world and starting to take, risk? Do you see that as like an advantage?
Yeah, absolutely. I think generally speaking, there is a very interesting thing that happens when you immigrate to the United States, because at the end of the day, I think a lot of people forget this, and this is my own biased opinion, but I still believe the United States is the best country in the world, right?
Amen.
So many people move to this country for the hopes of a better life, right? Yeah. If you go to a different country, people talk about it. It's a dream, right? And so they come and they go chase that dream. Now, do they know what's gonna happen? No. But what is different is when people come as immigrants into the country, they are starving. Not like I need food, but like I'm gonna chase the opportunity with, regardless of the implications, the work, the barriers I have to do, like I'm gonna get it done, right? So there is this external hunger that drives this desire to thrive and build a better life that when you're, and I'm not saying for everybody, but when you're born here, it becomes a little complacent. You become a little comfortable, right? And I think there's a more esoteric and philosophical conversation we can have about that. But I think in general, when people get too comfortable because life becomes too easy, we start losing our edge, right? Because as humans, we need that. We need to be pushed. We need to be put in our discomfort zone. I have a belief that you're only growing when you're uncomfortable. And so I think for us, it's like when you're coming from this high stress environment, you come to the country, you have no money, you have no assets, you don't even speak the English language natively, you're gonna be driven. So it's like you look at an opportunity, you're like, well, if that person wants to sit on the sidelines and not go chase that, I'm gonna go snap that up and take my next step, which I've honestly, I think probably the last 10 years came to that realization. That's been really, I think, a strength. And if you know how to use it. Long answer short, I think it's absolutely a huge advantage if you know how to harness it and you're aware of what's going on.
That's my feeling as well. That's why I wanted to get your take on it. You know, you being somebody who actually went through it, I wanted to, you know, hear it from you.
Yeah.
But that's been my hypothesis for a while. I'm definitely not the first, you know, to think it or to say it or ask the question, but that's like the running theme, you know. That's why we see, like, you look at so many of the tech companies, like the CEOs, like the top people are, you know, they're immigrants, like folks, they might be like, you know, second generation, but still folks that came from a place where they saw real struggle. They had to start from nothing. They had no advantages, they had no crutches. They had to actually use literally just their hands and their minds to like build something and prove it to themselves, right? That like they could do it and then build off of that. That work ethic is just built into them. It's part of their instinct almost.
Yeah, Jonathan, the way I like to put it, and some people don't agree with this and that's fine, but I fully believe that America is a place for equal opportunity, but not equal outcomes.
I agree with that,
I mean, yes, some people are gonna be at a disadvantage starting off, but to me, it's still a great equalizer. So if you come here and you put in the work and you don't get in trouble and you keep your head above water, like you're gonna make a better life than you could elsewhere.
God bless America. I definitely love it here too, man. Like I know we got some issues and all that, but
of course, man.
Overall,
nothing's perfect.
Like where else can you really go, you know, and like have that kind of a story, you know, where you can like
exactly.
Just out of like the merit, you know, that you bring to the table, out of that value that you bring, you can literally just build something up from nothing. I mean, I think all of us that are sitting here have done something, you know, like, I mean, I haven't like fully struck out on my own. Y'all too have. It's just amazing, you know, the fact that like here we are, all of us minorities, you know, and we've been able to like make something amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. You know, I was gonna ask about it. I asked about it last time, so I have to ask about it here, and I want to go into it more. I've always been a big fan of Y Combinator, you know, all the companies that come out of it. You know, it's a myth, you know, in the Valley. Like, it's almost like legendary, right? Like, if you get picked up to go to Y Combinator, like, you've been minted. That's the word. You've been minted. You've been minted as a company, as a person. Yeah, you've been deemed worthy. Yeah, if you get picked up for Y Combinator, and you're almost, you know, I mean, it's not true that you're like guaranteed to do well, but like, if you get picked up for it, you know, that's a big signal of a future outcome, possibly. So I really just want to dive into it. I know we kind of talked about it a little bit before, but I really just wanted to get like, you know, what was that experience like? First off, you know, how did you even decide, you know, to go for Y Combinator? Did you apply for it? Did they find you? You know, what was that application process like? And what was the process going through it? You know, what did you learn? And one of the other questions actually, did you come into it with a product already? Were you building it during Y Combinator? So, a lot of questions there, but
we'll unpack that, absolutely. It's I get asked about YC all the time. Yeah, to your point, it has a little bit of a mystique to it, right? But it's really nothing special in the sense of that way. What YC has done that's incredible is that they've identified some of the most critical things that a startup needs to be successful, especially the early stages, because the early stages are the most volatile. You have the highest risk, you have the highest attrition of founders, you have the hardest time building a team. The way I like to kind of summarize what YCs look for, because I actually talk to quite a few people that will reach out and say, I'm applying to YC, what should I do? How do I get accepted? And my advice is that obviously you have to know your expert space to some degree, right? Because you're selling something to somebody. So you better know your stuff, you better know your shit, right? But secondly, what YC really looks for, and I would say this is for any investor, because YC is an institutional investor, that's really what they are. It's the people, as always. So they look at the founders, and they say the founders, and Paul Graham actually writes a lot about this, they say if I find two founders, the highest data points that we can have conviction that they're going to move on to the next stage is how well they get along.
Oh, wow.
And then how also that other founder is going to stay in the game. Because what ends up happening is, and this is with any startup, right? Why do people fail? Is because within 6 months, that foot starts letting off the gas pedal. As soon as you do that, momentum is slowing down, you're done. You can't pick it back up. That doesn't happen because your runways are already finite. And then the people that also need cash, how are you going to find these people to be able to come and join in on this mission when they have to go pay their bills, they have mouths to feed, right? So within about 6 months, they go, well, I don't have a corporate paycheck, right? I'm not getting any money in the door. So it's too painful and I can't do this. So I'm gonna go do a side job, right?
Okay, gotcha.
As soon as you make that step,
take their eyes off
you're
the
done.
ball.
You're done. That's the reality. So you have to have 100% commitment and conviction. So that's like one of the biggest things YC actually talks about without actually talking about it initially. So once you start going through it, you'll start seeing this kind of revolving trend. The group partners, the founders, the presidents, like they talk about this. They call it founder market fit. right? So the FMF. So you have your product market fit, but before product market fit, always will come founder market fit. And then you also asked about the application process. My advice is anyone who's applying to it, you have to do at least twice. This is my kind of tinfoil hat conspiracy on this. I think the first time, the acceptance rate is extremely low. The second time, your chances go up. We applied twice. I think a reason they do that as well is because the second time, they want to see, hey, did you guys get past the first time, and are you still alive? Right? And then also it's kind of that resiliency, because you have to be tenacious, you have to be persistent. So we had to do it twice. Funny stories, actually, when we did the interview, we had no idea what to expect. It's 15 minutes long. You get on the call with your partners and they just like rapid fire. You feel like you're being interrogated, but it's like the most like arbitrary, like, you know, just like broad questions, and you're like, what? They're like, okay, give me a use case of like how you would, you know, provide defense for this phishing attack. You're like, okay, so you start talking about it, but like it's not really too related to your product in a sense, right? Because that's like something that you know anyways, right? Like what's the use case for that playbook? What I noticed was they're really looking for is, do you know your information? How quick can you respond, and are you confident? Because they're just throwing all these questions at you to see if you actually fumble.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So don't fumble, just like, because it's confidence. So you have conviction that you know there's a problem. They know that you probably know how to solve the problem, but you have to have the spirit and energy to show that you're willing to keep trying until you find it, because pivots are actually one of the most constant things in any startup. You're going to have to pivot, always. All the big companies, they've all pivoted. So I think that's part of the application process. So anyways, we got accepted. They called me, I remember this call, and I get a call from a group partner. And he was a great guy. And he's like, hey, so just want to give you a call to let you know that we've accepted you guys into this cohort. And at the time, I definitely have my idiotic moments. This is one of them. We were talking actually with a VC who thought we were closing some funding from. And, you know, I said, hey, you know what, Harsh? No, I really appreciate you calling me, but can I come back to you in about 2 weeks? And his response was like,
dang. He's just taken aback.
He had no. He's like, wait, what? And because
you know who I am?
Yeah, because a part of it was like we can go down the institutional route, right, and the investor, because there is actually some material dilution that you take with YC, right?
Yeah, it is.
And that's a lot of what people have a rub with. So I was looking from a pragmatic perspective, me being very logical. But when I spoke with my co-founder, we kind of took a step back and said, this is a good opportunity. We can use this as a learning experience, and then I'll kind of elevate the brand, right? And that's exactly the value that we got out of it. So when we went into it, it was a 3-month fast track process, learned a lot, got really great use cases, anecdotal experiences from some amazing founders, Airbnb, Brex. These guys came on and just said, hey, this is where we started. And guess what? It was like something being built in a shack. It was like the most, not even a prototype, it was like before prototype. And that's kind of where we were, because for us, we came in with a little bit of a product. But if you look at the product that we have today versus what we had then, it's not even comparable. It's like a full-fledged product. Then it was almost wireframe and just skimming by MVP.
Okay, so you did have something working though, before you came in.
Working is giving us a lot of credit. Gotcha. I would say it's the concept, because it was more, I think a lot of people, you can go tell them an idea, but until they actually see a tangible version of that idea, you can't really conceptualize what that really is, right? So we had to kind of do that where you can understand conceptually what we're trying to achieve. Because we're building very deep tech and there's a lot of layers. So it's a 5-7 year tech investment that's only going to keep, you know, growing in perpetuity.
Makes sense. You mentioned the word conviction. I think that's the one that kept popping into my head as you were talking about all this. It's kind of your theory that, you know, they wait for you to apply the second time.
Yeah.
I was literally thinking that word in my head when you were talking about that. I was like, yeah, they're probably testing your conviction more than like confidence or, you know, grace under pressure or anything else, right? It's really about that conviction. That's what it really comes back to, is like, do you actually believe in this thing, or are you just here to like collect our check, or
absolutely,
you know, are you just here to, you know, get the prestige of, you know, coming here, etc. I definitely see that.
It's a commitment thing.
Yeah, exactly. That makes a lot of sense. So in terms of, you know, those early days when you were barely had product or whatever, what would you say were like the big things that you did at YC that pushed you forward, that pushed not just, you know, the product, but like the company, you as a person? Like what did you like really get by going through YC, other than, you know, the money obviously and like the prestige of going through it? Like what was that like?
Yeah, the two biggest things I have as a takeaway, the first was a very good reminder to focus, because I think one of the underlying issues where many startups fail is because they lack focus, right? They try to be everything to everyone.
Try to please everybody. Try to expand into like a big market rather than just like being.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And what ends up happening is you actually dilute your authenticity, the value that you're providing, right? You know, it's analogous to me, kind of like dating, right? you're gonna go date and try to put on a facade to be somebody else, like you're not gonna find the right person for yourself, right? Product market fit, you have to go out there. Of course, you're gonna get feedback, you're gonna constantly iterate, but keep the focus on like that one very specific profile. And then test it, experiment. And then you're gonna fail a lot of times, right? But that's that iterative process that helps you not only build the muscle to increase your focus, but you're pulling data at the same time that's helping you drive towards a solid thesis that's going to prove it out, right? Or you're going to have a thesis that you can prove out without the data. So I think the focus is really good because they say for 90 days, you're just going to have this one main focus, which is for any startup, one of the most important things is revenue, right? So go build something to go generate revenue.
So they specifically tell you that that's your goal at the end of the 90 days.
You want metrics.
Oh, wow, interesting.
Well, and the reason, right, if you think about it, Jonathan, the metrics you want from revenue is because what YC does, and this is why they're successful, is in 90 days, they're ramping you up to be investor ready.
Okay.
Because what's the last thing you do in YC? It's demo day. They give you 60 seconds to go out on a stage of like 3,000 investors and you're pitching your product for 60 seconds, which is absurd. Like who pitches, you can't pitch anything for 60 seconds, man. Right? So
that is pretty
yeah,
crazy.
so but what they do is they're like up to that point show that you're making the traction because investors want to see the growth. They want to see that linear curve or the exponential curve going. That's the hockey stick. And so if they can hook in early, then they can start seeing that attachment and the value and the return.
Do you think that that's maybe that metric is something more recent? Because at least from my point of view, being kind of like a student of the industry and just keeping up with like, you know, YC and other companies that have gone through and all that, it really seemed to me that for a long time, the focus was just on user growth. It was like, how many users can you get as fast as possible, take on as much like debt or whatever you need to do to like get to as many users as possible, and that's all we care about. So do you feel like that focus on revenue is maybe like a correction from that, or is it, maybe it has always been like revenue, I don't know, but that's just my perspective, is like for a long time it really was like get as many users as fast as possible, do whatever you have to do, like break laws if you have to, like Uber or whatever, you know, like do whatever you got to do. So what's your perspective on that?
No, you're 100% right. It was the venture community, their mindset was growth at all costs, right? So we'll capitalize, we'll make enormous losses in the first 5 to 8 years, but what we're really doing by doing user acquisition, logo acquisition, is you're capturing the market. When you capture the market, you can go sell to the market, right? So you look at, for example, so within our cybersecurity ecosystem, Palo Alto Networks, right? How's Palo Alto Networks able to go acquire, you know, what is it now, 10 or 12 different startups, probably ranging between $100 to $500 million in acquisition costs? That's a lot of money, right? How are they making that successful? It's because they started with an install base of 75,000 logos. So once you have the revenue there, you have the install base, it's easy to start applying essentially upgrade opportunities and driving net dollar retention.
Makes sense.
So that's what Uber's play is. Obviously they have more of a long-term play of autonomous vehicles and, you know, having the application infrastructure to be able to harness all the car infrastructure, right? But I think that's changed because that was a 2013, 2014 time where we saw more of a conservative nature is where we're back. So I think between the 2013-14 timeframe to about 2022, 2023, it was just the wild, wild west. Deploy capital, grow at all costs. Now it's going back, and I think the market is correcting, and where actually a lot of startups are struggling because there's a recessive amount of deployment of capital. There's a lot of dry powder sitting over here. So the money doesn't go away. It just gets shuffled around, right? And now they're holding the money. So now what investors are really looking for is profitable companies. When can I expect that you're going to be cash flow positive? What's your operational cash flow look like? What are your EBITDA numbers going to look like? So now those are numbers that are trying to be extrapolated out to early stage companies sooner than later. Before it was like, yeah, whatever, let's go get to C or D round. We'll deploy $300 million and then we'll figure out how to make it.
They don't even ask about the money.
Yeah, we'll figure out
like until later
profitability
on.
comes later. And then the second piece I would just quickly mention is that this was a YC thing. So, and I've taken this with me, and I think it's very applicable. Their whole focus and their saying is do things that don't scale. And I think that's really important to actually note because I think a lot of startup founders, they think they can do everything and they try to do too much and they start thinking about how do I scale this? You're like, wait a second, you guys have 10 customers that would die for you, right? Like strong customer advocacy. If you don't, go get that first. Because how are you gonna go sell this to another 1,000 customers if you don't have 10 diehard advocates, right? So start there, do things that don't scale. You're gonna do a lot of manual things. You're gonna do things where you have to do yourself. You're gonna be wearing 20 hats. But once you rinse and repeat that up to about 10, 15, then you have a framework, you have a template, and then you go take that blueprint and then start building a team around that to go build up really the architecture and the building on top of that blueprint.
Yeah, no, man, that's a lot to unpack there, but wow. When you guys came out of YC, were you meeting that revenue target that they set for you? Did you have like more customers? Was your product in a more mature place, or what did it look like at that point?
Yeah, we made some forward progress for sure. We increased bookings and revenue. The problem was, if you look at like our cohort, some of them were getting a lot more faster growth. But keep in mind, a lot of YC's portfolio companies, they're B2C. So B2C growth can happen almost in a virality sense, right? When you're selling B2P, deep tech enterprise technology, it's that curve, it can be difficult, right? Because you got to think about the sales cycle, right? A user that goes picks up Uber is going to be much more different than a user that goes and buys ContraForce and deploys all the underlying security infrastructure, right? Because one is more of a bottom-up approach, the other one's a top-down approach from a sales motion. So we had a longer sales cycle, essentially. So we got some growth, but we built pipeline, and so that started. But what it helped us is that we focused, we developed the product really fast in 90 days. It wasn't done, of course, but we really kind of leapfrogged, and we made some revenue growth. And then that allowed us to be able to go to the next set of investors who actually closed our initial, essentially pre-seed round, Data Tribe. And we got that done at the beginning of 2022. And so that really set us up to be able to be positioned to go to the investors and come ready, show that we're pretty prepared. And I think ultimately, like me and my co-founder, we just built like a very strong relationship. So when we got in front of that investor team, they're like, they may not have the answers today, but they're gonna figure it out eventually.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Maybe this is a bit of a cheesy question, but let's say I'm a potential customer of yours. Why should I buy your product?
Yeah, so let's say you're like an MSP, right? And if you were looking at how you manage security alerts and incidents with your XDR tools that you have deployed to your customers, how can we simplify that? The reality is that you're probably looking at those maybe half-assed, right? You're maybe looking at it from a technician who's not a security expert, and you're maybe putting about 10 hours every month for a single end customer to manage those alerts. And that's just for like endpoint detection, right? So now what happens when you want to increase the security posture of those customers by deploying something like a SIEM? You're not gonna be able to, right? So you have these complex tools, you're not doing a good job managing the detections and the data that's being generated off of them. And then are you also providing the proper security engineering resources to make them work the way they're supposed to, by like tuning the detection rules, creating the right response playbooks? What we've seen is predominantly most of those MSPs, no. The answer is always no, we don't have that. So ContraForce is the simplified way to take your security operations, if you're a provider, deploy it, it's cost affordable, it's highly scalable, it's secure and compliant by design, so the data always stays with the end customer. And you now have a SaaS platform, we call it a SecOps service management platform, where you can go manage these security operations tools in one place. And you don't have to have the engineering resources. So it actually provides you those managed detection and response capabilities without having the overhead that you typically would have to in the past.
So you see yourselves as like a force multiplier for your customers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So they can take like whatever existing team they have, right? Because I'm sure they have a team of experts that they rely on, etc. But then they can add a lot of capability without having to necessarily add more body count.
Exactly.
Is that kind of how you see it?
Yeah, and we're in that place where, we call hyper automation kind of that next state of automation, which is everything you can automate, you will automate. And then starting to introduce AI in terms of the sense of creating unique data set models that are specific to a end customer's risk profile that essentially has detection content, response content, and then also using workflow logic to help them accelerate their productivity. So we kind of bring all those three elements together in a single product and platform. And like you said, it force multiplies the investment of resources they have today.
In terms of the maturity of your product, how would you say that you compare up against some of like the more established competitors?
Yeah, I would say we're actually getting quite close to companies that are out there that are probably 5 to 6 years into their development journey. We've been very, very focused on just R&D because we knew we had to essentially provide a very usable and very valuable product, right? I think the problem with cybersecurity is that we've seen this a lot of times. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors.
Yeah,
you build this, this company that says, you've seen the silver bullet thing, right? It's like, oh yeah, I could have stopped that SolarWinds breach. You're like, no, you couldn't. So I mean, and anyone in the market, such as yourself, knows that that's just complete bullshit, right? Yeah, so just don't do that. So we knew that we had to go build a useful product, and so we've heavily invested into some amazing engineering talent, and we spent most of our resources there. I think that's what's helped us accelerate a little faster, even being a lean, small team. So I think in the next 2 years, we're going to leapfrog because we're also approaching this from a completely different perspective. we actually kind of get sometimes lumped into like SOAR platform, but we're not a SOAR platform, right? So there's a aspect of also educating the market, because no one in the past has gone to like an MSP. If you ran your MSP, Jonathan, no one would come to you and say, hey, can I increase your internal security operations productivity, increase your gross margin profits, and help you deliver new revenue services? They don't do that.
They're just not going to believe
They don't do that. They won't believe that. All they'll say is like, hey, a vendor would come to you and say, here's my product, go resell it. We want to change that and say, no. We want to give you the tooling to be able to go get those same outcomes that some other vendors trying to have you resell for them.
Gotcha. Yeah, man, that's a good pitch. You know, if I had the money, I would. But jokes aside, so you said that any business you can expect to have a bunch of pivots. Can you talk about some of yours?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there were definitely hard lessons learned, I'll tell you that. So we started off actually going directly to SMB and SME customers. Okay. So direct customer acquisition. That's rough. It's very rough, especially in cybersecurity. One thing you learn very quickly is that, and it's just, I think, iterated, no one likes to spend money on cybersecurity. Right?
No, you're right. It's a hard sell.
It's a hard sell.
It's a cost center for most companies. That's how they see it. They don't see it as something that's gonna equip me to do better in the future, better serve my customers. They're just like, oh, this is like a compliance requirement or something I have to do just to.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have the Bank of Americas of the world. Yeah. They have $1 billion on their cyber budget, right? Wow. You go to a small company, they have a $500 monthly budget. There's a massive spectrum. And so you have to kind of find, how do I provide some level of consistent delivery and commercials that makes it applicable for the whole market, right? I honestly think that was one of the biggest challenges, and it's something that we still continue to work on. We've gotten a lot of data over the past few years that has put us in a strong position where it's viable from a package and commercial perspective. So economically, that's really a big barrier we had to get through. But the challenge of going to direct was really that we're just a component of the entire layer of service delivery, right? Yeah. So if you look at it from a shared responsibility perspective, an MSP is kind of the trusted advisor for these companies, mid-market SMB, right? Because they run all their IT ops, they run their network ops, everything. Yep. So they should also run your SecOps. And so we're trying to enable that layer. And while we went direct, we noticed that since we don't have those IT ops and network ops, all those service capabilities, the end user looks at us and says, well, what about the rest, right? You guys do this. Well, no, we don't, because we have to, going back to what we talked about, it's the focus. Because we start doing that, then we lose
they just want the one tool that can do it all. It just kind of just make me forget about security. Like I don't need to worry about it.
Yeah,
so,
that makes sense. And there's vendors trying to do that, but to me, it's a little bit of a moot point because it's a race to the bottom. Because all you're doing is just repackaging commodity tools. Yeah. And good luck going against, and we talked about this a little bit when we had coffee, the big guys like Microsoft, right? Because now they bundle this stuff together, and they give it away almost for free or at a reduced cost. You can't compete against that.
So how do you see the current state of the business? Like where are you guys at? Do you feel like you are, on that hockey stick up? Are you still kind of like early days? Overall, like where are you guys at, in your startup journey?
There's a time where you kind of just wake up and you know where you're supposed to be, and you're like, okay, I can now see that trajectory. We're right there. Okay. So we're right there at that hockey stick. We actually, and we'll have some announcements over the next few weeks about this, but we had some new investors coming in. They're awesome. They're helping us with the UK expansion. So we're actually also getting global expansion, which is nice. Our team is growing. We're looking to hit some strong revenue numbers by end of 2024, and we're looking to go get after a bigger finance round as well to grow the team even further. So this has really been, I think, a strong accumulation of all of our hard work and everyone's diligence to get to this point. And we probably made about 2 strong pivots. This last one we made was probably beginning of 2023, where we went all into the channel and said, let's support these partners, right? And honestly, that was the game changer for us, because it's just a very uniquely valued proposition that if you go out there in the market, it's not there. And I don't say that lightly because I know it's still a competitive space. For us, it's gonna grow, and we're looking to actually about 5x our growth and revenue this year. And then by the next year, we're aiming to get close to 10 million ARR.
No, that's amazing. Congrats on the success thus far. And I really wish you all the best. That sounds amazing.
Thank you.
What would you say are some of those milestones that you're looking to hit in the next 3 to 5 years? Like what's on your roadmap to get you to that next level, to make you a unicorn?
There's going to be a lot of product building, I'll tell you that. There's going to be a lot of also learning to build out. Like for us, we put a lot of value in what I call the peanut butter and jelly, which is the customer success, right? Because it's kind of what holds everything together, or the partner success. I've seen enough also in the past where when you have this disparate engagement model with like a sales, account executive, account management, customer success, pre-sales, right? It works, but it doesn't work for everybody. So we're really focusing on investing into the partner customer success layer, the peanut butter and jelly, because it holds the bread together, right? And for us, again, if I'm going to you as an MSP, I'm giving you a whole new proposition and pitch, right? Which is like, I'm gonna help you drive a whole new service market. And so if that layer is not well invested into and built out appropriately, we're not gonna do a good job. We're gonna fail. We put a lot of value into that, and the product integrations are also gonna be big. I know you're more of a multi-cloud guy, so am I, but for us, that's what we're gonna do as well long term. So we're gonna expand outside of the Azure cloud, we're gonna expand outside of Microsoft. It's still gonna be a big core competency of us because, again, we have the security data gravity that Microsoft is developing, and there's no way getting away from that. And most of our customers are using some of the licensing. So we just have to be conscious of that because that's what it is, right? So we'll continue going outside of those platforms from Microsoft and outside of Azure, and really providing a single platform that can work on any cloud and really connect all these mainstay detection and response tools in one place and help manage it from an overhead perspective.
It sounds like you have like a very clear roadmap that you got going on. So that's awesome that you kind of, like you said, you kind of like see where you're going to go. Yeah. You're already seeing like that growth, right? So it's really about execution at this point, huh?
That's all it is.
Let's say you're 10 years down the road. What does that long-term strategy for you look like? Is this something that you see yourself just running it for the rest of your career? Or is it like, are you guys looking for a certain kind of exit? Or is it too early to think about that?
Being in that position with the company in 10 years, we will be IPO. If it hits 10 years, right?
Gotcha.
The way I kind of always put it is that, making these kind of decisions on, 3, 5, 7, 10 years, I've already mapped that out. I'm a big believer of like really knowing the direction that you're going, right? If somebody asks you, for example, where are you going to be in 10 years and you don't have a strong answer, then you're already there. So like we've already mapped out what that would look like. Now the decision comes down to what is the best fiduciary thing for the company and our employees? Because every stage of that growth cycle comes with different implications. And so it's not about me, it's not about my co-founder, it's about everyone that we're bringing in that's actually on the same mission and making sure that we're doing right by them. So it's hard for us to kind of like, it's hard for me to tell you kind of what that looks like because it really boils down to the best decision that we have to make to not only support our employees, but also our customers as well too. So, and we just heavily index on that. It's probably the most important thing for us.
That's amazing. No, and I love that you brought up like you really want to take care of your people. I think that's something that so many companies, they miss that. Like they get so focused on, oh, we gotta serve the customer, we gotta serve the shareholders, etc. And they start seeing their employees as replaceable. Yeah. And to me, that's like, dude, that's the first sign of their decline. Like
I agree.
When you stop valuing your people, right, the humans that actually go out there and build your product, deliver your product, make your customers happy, as soon as you start devaluing them, there's nowhere to go but down at that point.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Not only do I lose respect for those companies, but I immediately would just write them off. You have no future really, because who are you without your people?
Yeah, and exactly. And then the people, if you invest into the people first, the customers will be taken care of.
100%. And that's what, again, so many companies I think miss that, especially in these days where you see a lot of companies that are doing like mass layoffs and things like that. It's like you got to think about what is the cost of that. What is your long-term cost of that, right? Like you're saving money in the short term, and that's nice. Maybe your shareholders give you a bump on your stock price, etc. But what did you lose? And that's something that I don't think enough companies are thinking about these days. Big question here that I wanted to ask, kind of a fun question. You might need to think about it for a second. What do you see as your unfair advantage? Maybe not just as a company, but as like, you, and what is that like unfair advantage that makes you so great? I
would say it's being the underdog.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love being the underdog. I never want to not be the underdog, honestly.
Well, so for you, so why is the underdog like a good position to be?
I love punching up. I just love looking at, what are the guys that are, ahead of me doing, and what are they not doing, and how can I capitalize? And I just love the feeling of like, constantly being on the journey. Like, I don't want the journey to end for me. Like I feel like so many people get so focused on the outcome, like I'm gonna be a millionaire, or I'm gonna, be the CEO of like a big company or whatever. And it's like, that's fun. That's definitely part of it. But like the journey is like the fun part, Yeah, that's my answer at least.
No, I love it, man.
This is I'm interviewing you. Like, what's going on here?
I gotta throw that one at you because I think that one is.
That's a good question.
No, I agree with you because for me, it's you're punching up, but I think from my side, I agree with that. I love catching people when they sleep because a lot of people get so complacent because they're like, hey, I reached where I wanted to go. To your point, it could be some arbitrary arbitrary outcome. And then you just have an opportunity to go seize the moment, right? Also, when people don't give you enough credit because they're like, oh, well, it's too ambitious, or I don't think you're gonna get there, right? There's all these kind of macro trends. Great. What you just told me is what I need as fuel to get there and then beyond. So thanks for telling me that, because now I know I can go do it. Essentially, it's just like a clear path. So every single time you hear something like that, there's another, green light for me to go faster.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's similar to this topic, but going back to, like the fact that the market, or like the investor market has they've changed in like the way that they invest, and the money's not coming as easily. It's my theory that the best companies come out of these hard times. And it kind of goes into like what we've already talked about, in terms of where we came from and all that kind of stuff. But like the companies that make it out of the hard times are usually the ones that last the longest. You see like Microsoft, right? Like they came out of the dot-com bubble. Facebook came out of '08 crisis, all that. And it's good for those companies that I would say like yours, who are actually making things happen, who are actually delivering real value. You're not just focused on vanity metrics or anything like that. You're actually going out there, you're actually delivering. It makes it easy for you. All those other companies, all those other would-be competitors that are just kind of not really there, but they're taking up space, they all fall away, and then you get to shine, and I love it. That's amazing. Yeah. So moving into a little bit, why did y'all decide to incorporate here? Why are you here? Why are you in Dallas? I guess we're in McKinney right now. That's where your HQ is, but why here? Why did y'all decide to build here?
So, I mean, technically we were at, we had a Delaware incorporation, but to your point of like why we started here and built, obviously I've been in Dallas my whole life. Started looking around, like where can we set up shop and look at all the surrounding cities, talk to the city council, talk to the Economic Development Corporation. And surprisingly, I thought it was pretty forward thinking. Some of these, these sub-cities here in DFW, a lot of them are they're behind, honestly. So you start saying, hey, if I do open a shop here, because I'm trying to drive market growth, right? Drive new job opportunities. Are there incentives for us? There was none. The only place we found that was willing to put some skin in the game was McKinney. And so I was fortunate enough to meet the gentleman who started, Danny. He's now moved out of it, but him and the MEDC team, the McKinney Economic Development Corporation, started this innovation fund. And we're actually one of the first companies that did that. And they said, look, you go hire people, you guys grow, and we can incentivize that growth. And to me, I'm like, as a startup, exactly. As a startup, you're like, I can use any help that I can, right? So for us, it was a really awesome opportunity, because in the day, I'm a firm believer about this. It's like, if you invest into me, I'm gonna provide that investment back tenfold, right? Amen. Because it's kind of that high risk, high reward aspect, but you took risk. You said, I'm gonna give you guys a shot. Keep in mind, that goes way back, right? It's been nurtured in me my whole life, because we got here from a different country because somebody decided to give us a shot. Because we didn't just jump on a boat and float over here, right? Like, we had somebody literally had to actually sponsor us. They had to write all this paperwork, get us through all these barriers. So somebody made that investment. So, it's kind of come full circle where now I have an opportunity to give people an opportunity. So when people give us an opportunity to be able to elevate that goal, I'm always gonna come back and see how it can help. It's payback. 100%. It's always payback, man. Absolutely.
Yeah. Other than, like definitely that economic incentive, I definitely agree with that. That makes a lot of sense, and I think it's very smart for the city of McKinney to make that happen.
I agree.
Like, you're not the first person I've heard that's like, working with them. Like, they got something cooking. Like, something's happening here.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Also, outside of that, I mean, I would posit that just the environment here, just the culture, Texas as a whole, the people here in Texas, the people here in Dallas is just like the mix of friendliness, right? Like, people are genuinely kind, genuinely friendly. You can go anywhere and, you sit down at a restaurant or whatever, that, you're gonna get like good service, right? Like, the people are friendly. Yeah. If you want to go to sit at the bar, you can talk to somebody. They're not gonna be off-put by you, talking to them. They're gonna like open up. You can network, you can talk to people. People love being here, and people in a way love each other here, right? Like, we all have like a shared kindred, right? We're all very proud of saying like, I'm in Texas. Like, you don't mess with Texas.
It's a pride, absolutely. Yeah.
So I personally posit, that's like huge part of why I would start a company here. Is that kind of how you feel as well? Like, do you feel that environment, that culture also feeds into, helps you and your company? Was that something that played a part into you guys deciding to stay here rather than going to the Valley or somewhere else?
Yeah, I think so. I think Texas is very unique in its culture. I heard Ross Perot Jr. say this when he helps people start businesses or get a job here in Texas. He doesn't wonder, where you've come from. He wants to know what you've done and what you're going to do. And so I think the Texas culture is really predicated on that idea, is that you come here, it's not really like how you associate yourself with others or who you're with or how you identify. It's what value are you providing?
Yep.
And so I think the Texas culture is about that. It's all about value-driven ethics and value outcomes. So if I'm coming in here, and I think also why we've been relatively insulated from a lot of like recessive market activity is because people get done work here. Like they get to work, they work. And I think so that culture, it's a matter of time when we get more population density here, it's just gonna kind of permeate because to your point, there's a kind of a law of attraction there. And people are coming to the state of Texas for a reason. So, and I think it's because of that culture that they sense when they come here. There's no frills, there's no crap in between all this. It's just you see what you get. And I think in this world today, we need a lot more of that authenticity.
100%. One of the reasons why I decided to move here 2.5 years ago. I mean, I had lived in Texas before. One of the things that I missed, and it sounds weird, but one of the things I missed was just being another guy. Just nobody looking at you, nobody being like, oh, there's that brown dude, or, you know, oh, he probably looks like he's Mexican or whatever. You know, like you go out and there's such a mix of people and nobody cares, right? Like it's fun to learn where people are from, but there's no like initial like, oh, you are, you know, that guy, so I'm gonna treat you a certain way. Whereas where I lived before, in other places I've lived, you know, like Alabama or Tennessee, etc. I'm not gonna call it like racism. It's not necessarily racism, although that does exist, but it's a certain, and I hate to say the word prejudice, but it kind of is, right? They look at you and they have an expectation of who you're gonna be, the kind of work you do, your mentality,
it's a bias for sure.
Your values, etc. They make that determination just by looking at you. Whereas here, I walk down the street, nobody looks at me twice. You know, I kind of just blend in. I talk to somebody, you know, we can just talk about whatever topic. Hey, I work in tech, you know, let's talk about that, whatever. There's no barrier there. There's no like, nothing in front of us. There's no like weird glass wall in between us. I personally just love that. Like the biggest reason, outside of everything else, outside of like the great food and everything we have here, the biggest reason why I will stay here for a long time is because of that, because I'm just another average Joe, you know, like I'm just another guy. And it really goes back to what you said, where it's like, not necessarily my worth, but like the respect that I earn here is because of the value that I bring.
Exactly.
It's not gonna be because of my skin color, it's not gonna be, you know, whatever else. It's gonna be like, oh yeah, this guy, Jonathan, he does X, Y, and Z, like he brings that value here. And so we respect him for that.
No, absolutely. It's, you know, most of the time you talk to people here, it's always typically, what do you do? So it's always a conversation because people want to understand, because whatever you're doing that anchors your own personal self-worth, right? That's good because it adds back to the place you live in the community. And I think the community here, like I have friends in the Valley, you know, you can come here and everything's just friendly, feels like a family and everyone's close, right? And so it's hard to find that, right?
It's really is.
It's very hard to find that.
100%. Yeah. I do want to move a little bit into a couple of like maybe more personal questions just about you, if you don't mind. I know we've already kind of started, we kind of got into it, we kind of been going a little bit all over the place, but it's all kind of gelled together really well. This is a question that I like to ask a lot of people, so I'm just going to ask it to you straight up. What is your mission in life?
So I've thought about that one quite a few times. It's really about providing, and kind of already mentioned this, is providing opportunity to people. That's really it. Because at the end of the day, I love to tell the story because I heard it a long time ago and it really kind of helped solidify that feeling. Because for me, it was kind of like everywhere, right? Like, why do I like to do this? Like early on, I told you I was doing the pre-med thing, right? Why was I doing pre-med? Because I love to help people. When I was going through college, I was still doing things on the IT side. I also had a side business. I was doing my own personal training. You spend about an hour with people that are going through a lot of rough stuff, but ultimately they're there to better themselves, right?
True.
So that was kind of the early stage. And then I saw the opportunity to go down a career path where I can actually help improve people's life and then their family and their friends, right? The thing that really left an impression was this journalist talking about the time he was trying to actually interview on a biography Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple. After years of just tenacious, like, hey, Steve, like, give me time, let me ask you questions, he finally caved and said, fine, come out to Cupertino, I'll give you 2 weeks, you can spend time with me. Guy flies out, and then halfway through his time with Steve, he asked that same question. He goes, why do you do what you do? And he's like, what drives you? And he goes, all right, well, let's jump in a car, and I'm gonna take you somewhere, and then you'll understand why. He's like, okay, Steve told me to get in the car, we're getting in the car. So they get in the car, they start driving, they go about 45 minutes out from Cupertino, from the headquarters, and they approach this gated community, beautiful houses, multi-million-dollar houses. And they pull up to the gate, and the guy looks at Steve, he goes, do you live here? He's like, oh, no. He's, I don't live here, but here's the gate code. He's like, all right, that's weird. So he puts in the gate code, they drive in, and they're just driving through this very opulent, very nice, beautiful neighborhood. And the guy's looking around, the reporter, he's super confused. And he's like, Steve, why are we here? He goes, well, the majority of people living here that have this real estate, they're Apple employees.
Oh, wow.
And this is exactly why I do what I can do, or I do, because these people can have this lifestyle and they have an opportunity to raise the family the way they ideally would like to. So for me, that really, really resonated. And I was like, I love that. Because again, the full cycle thing is like, you give me opportunity, I should be able to do that times 100x. And so, you know, I love when we're able to hire somebody, it's driving towards that accomplishment. The way I see it, it's actually infinite, because if I put a finite goal of like, oh, I want to help this amount of people, then I'm limiting myself. So I think there's an opportunity to constantly drive that societal value, which to me, it's pretty straightforward. We all function on the same stuff. We need resources to be able to survive and then thrive, right? Yep. I think if the opportunity that I'm in allows me to be able to enable other people to get there, then that's amazing.
I love that. Yeah, and 100%. I really resonate with that as well, because I mean, the whole point of this channel, we're trying to build is really that. Like, we really want to help other folks see the capabilities that built, right, or that, like, you know, our guests have built here on the show, and be able to see it in themselves, really, first off, because you have to take that first step to believe in yourself first and realize that you can do it too. If I could, I would literally just download my brain and just like put it out there. Until that technology comes out, we'll do a YouTube channel, you know? But when it comes out, like, yeah, I would rather just do that. Like, hey, can I just give you like, you know, like my reasons for doing what I do? Can I just give you my knowledge, my experience? You know, hopefully that will spark something within other people.
I love it, yeah.
And they'll be able to make themselves better. And as we grow, of course, you know, as we start, you know, to hire our own people, one of my aspirations is, you know, to have like a proper tech company as well. You know, like maybe sometime in the future. I mean, I'm always working on something, but I really see that as one of my goals as well, where it's like, when I eventually start hiring people, I feel like I'm taking on like a deep responsibility. Yeah. Like, it's not a light decision.
Absolutely
it's not, oh, this is just like a couple, like, I hate the term human resources, because it's like, these are people. This is not like just a resource. Come on. It's a responsibility that you're taking on. You're almost like, you know, you're taking charge, like responsibility for their life almost.
Oh, exactly.
For however long they are with you.
Yeah, but you see what you did there for a moment. You said, you know, when I start giving people that opportunity, what you're doing is you're already creating yourself an identity. The way I look at it, it's like a value add identity. Your identity now is like, how do I add value to other people and back to society? And once you kind of make that seismic shift from a perspective and a frame of reference, things change for you quite a bit, because you stop looking at something and saying like, what is out of that can I pull out that's like value to me? And you start looking at the inverse and saying, what can I do to actually provide value? It becomes who you are.
It's almost like aligning your chakras. It's like, it's like opening the floodgate, because like as soon as the question becomes not like, what can I get, but what can I give?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. It changes your mind. You almost automatically develop a sense for how to serve your customers as well, because that's the entirety of your, you know, relationship with them, is like, what value can I provide
that's
for
who
them?
You are.
Yeah, so
you're just being yourself.
Love it, 100%. Yeah. You've had your ups and downs, you know, with the company, and things are going well for you now, and I love that for you. What kept you going through the hard times? What was that motivation? What would you say? Was it like just like an inner burning fire, or was it like family, or like, what was that reason that kept you going?
I love that you brought this question up. I didn't have motivation. It's just discipline. I love talking about those two things, because motivation, it's one of the most fleeting things you can have. It's super flaky. You're gonna wake up in the morning, and do you feel like getting out of bed to go do what you do? Nobody does. Nobody does. But what always eats motivation for breakfast is discipline. So once you have this structured approach and you do not sacrifice, you don't compromise, you just make these rules and you live by these principles and you get it done. I always love to use the example of waking up in the morning. You wake up in the morning, you have an alarm, let's say the alarm is 5:30 in the morning, the first thing you might do is snooze. And what have you done? You've already actually negotiated with yourself. You've already told yourself, hey, it's okay to push this off 5 minutes. As soon as you do that, it's a domino effect, because then you're always gonna kind of push that envelope and say, oh, that's okay, I can do this, or I'll wait for this to happen. But if you have discipline, and don't get me wrong, like I definitely hit snooze a lot still, it's hard, right? But the discipline is what you have to always fall back on. And because that is your choice to actually get up and start doing something that you should do, right? And so I think for me, that's been the driver, honestly. And what I end up doing is gauging, is my discipline in certain areas starting to waver? And if it is, pick it up and bring it back where it needs to be. Because every time you set a level of a baseline of discipline, and that baseline should always be increasing, because you're essentially, as a person, increasing your efficiency. If you have your ultimate goal to say like, hey, I gotta go produce opportunity for everybody, if that baseline starts to drop because you're compromising it, you're falling away from your end goal, right? The water, the tides will essentially raise all the ships, but you have to make sure that the water keeps going and you can't let that cork be pulled out.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, no, for sure. Motivation is kind of, it's nice to have, you know, when you have it, but the rest of the time you gotta just, the rest of the time, yeah, you have to have that dedication, that discipline, you know, to continue. I look around, you know, I don't mean to say this like disparagingly about anybody or anything, but I do see other people, you know, even like friends of mine, where it's like, they know what they're supposed to do. They know where they want to be in life, but they rely on the daily stroke of motivation to go out and actually do it. And I almost just want to like shake them and be like, dude, like wake up, you know? I won't get into it too much because I could talk about it all day, but I definitely agree. It really is that mindset shift that you have to have. You have to like have that click inside of you where it's, I'm doing this no matter what, because I have a higher purpose.
Exactly, it's your why.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think a lot of people have a hard time because it's what they're trying to find their purpose in the world and what they're doing. Until you do that, you're going to look at motivation is going to be a luxury, and then your discipline is a privilege. So just like realize what you should be doing, because you should have a purpose. You should have a mission. So I think a lot of people struggle with that today, unfortunately.
Bringing it back a little bit to the company a bit. Yeah. Tech-focused questions, and we can kind of do these a little bit fast. Why would you say, this is it's going to be such an easy one for you, but why would you say cybersecurity is important?
That is a layup for sure. Well, let me put it this way. I think cybersecurity is, at least what we're trying to do with cybersecurity, we are focused on making it a digital utility, right? Because I think ultimately cybersecurity, the reason it is hard to adopt and why it's not more pervasive is because it's just complex, right? When you go turn on your electricity, right? You go call up a provider and Reliant turns on your electricity. You need your ISP to turn on your 1 gig fiber. Great, give AT&T a call, right? Sorry for all the plugs. But those guys have a single digital service they have to go deliver. Cybersecurity should be the same way. So to me, that's the way we look at it, enabling a digital utility for the global economy and the digital world that is advancing very quickly. And with any utility, to answer your question, why is it important? It's because you need it to be able to survive. Cybersecurity, as it gets more permeated through every facet of our life, it's critical. It's hooked into critical infrastructure. It's connected to now also our telephone and personal devices, our home networks, everything. So without it, let's say you knock all this stuff out, we'll be thrown back in the Stone Ages in about 2 months, right?
True. If somebody were to want to get started in cybersecurity, what would your advice be?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of ways to skin that cat, for sure. I would start with hands-on application, just learning, right? When I started, if I had access to the content and material that is out there today, it would have been different. Education now, you have so many resources you can go and learn. It can be from SANS, you can look at MITRE, there's all this free curriculum. It's becoming a way that I've heard it been said, which I really like, is that cybersecurity is never going to be the next big thing, but it's always part of the next big thing. True. So like every single new development, like think of cloud, right? Like you have to know basic security infrastructure, controls, policy, right? It's a shared responsibility model. So you have to know these things. So you go learn like general, let's say cloud infrastructure management, security comes part of that. So just go out there, start learning. There's great resources. Maybe you want to go to community college. I'm seeing more colleges and universities now having cybersecurity curriculum that's either as associate or a full degree. So 10 years ago, if I went to go take classes for cybersecurity, there'd be maybe 1 or 2 off classes, but not a full course with a Foundstone project. So that's rapidly changing, which is great from a institutional perspective. But just get out there and start learning is the first thing, and then secondly, start applying. And then I think the last thing is network. Network is huge because we don't have a huge community. Get to know people, and the beautiful thing about the cyber community, it's kind of like Texas. Everyone's very friendly, and they want to help. I think that's also why we're going to have a very flourishing cyber ecosystem here in Texas.
It's pretty amazing. You know that there's these YouTube channels that help you out, answer all these questions, give you advice.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Those are great. Those are great channels.
You brought up the magic word. You brought up cloud. So I have to ask, what's your favorite cloud? And there is a right answer.
All right, we got to cut here.
You don't have to answer it if you don't want to.
Well, I'll answer honestly. I worked with hyperscalers for like 10 years. If you're a developer, it's going to be hard pressed to beat AWS. It's a developer platform. I'll do it this way. DevOps and developer use cases, AWS does really great, very strong. You want more IT operational use cases, Azure. GCP, I mean, if you want to take the one offline, I mean, that one, they're going to struggle, man.
Dang. You're honest. I appreciate it.
It's a hard play, and I've worked very closely with Google, honestly, and I appreciate what they're doing, but it's kind of a lose-lose game for them. They're going against two behemoths that have very carved out use cases, and they're trying to kind of wedge them in between.
Gotcha.
And it's hard, man.
That's good insight.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's my 2 cents. I think Google's doing great stuff, and I think as they focus more on their models, their data sets, and their AI play, I think that's where they're going to really be able to at least carve out a very strong market segment for them, where they can be a lot more dominant.
Good stuff. Yeah. Maybe we have some, folks from Google maybe watching. Good insights here. Last technical question here. What would you say is the role of AI in security? Where is it all headed?
Oh yeah, loaded question for sure. Obviously, it already is posing itself problematic for defenders. So threat actors, bad actors, obviously already utilizing it for low commodity attacks, building content, right? I think one of the most pervasive ones we're seeing now is like, phishing campaigns. Like you can literally go put out a campaign in a few minutes and it'll look legit, right? Yeah. And so it saves time there. And there's, I think, a lot of kind of adversarial use cases that, we're gonna be seeing more and more of. But on the same side, I think it does actually legitimately accelerate defense capabilities for cyber defenders. I think one of them, which is gonna be very valuable, is going to be around pulling in large data set models and then pulling out specific IOCs, parameters, properties, objects, whatever it is that you need for an investigation, right? So how do I sift through large terabyte databases to be able to find the needle in the haystack? I think that's going to be very helpful. The second piece, I think, is contextualizing information and bringing it down a level, right? So like what we're seeing currently with like, for example, GitHub Copilot, right? It's kind of commoditizing low-level development work. And so I think that's going to help also kind of take the security engineers up a level, but also those that aren't very smart on the engineering side or skilled, they can start using this to be able to actually identify, how do I write a query? How do I do these things to be able to actually identify if this is malicious or not? So I think that's it. And then I think the last piece is really about how do we harness it to make human decisions in the loop. If it's good enough to be able to stop a unified kill chain and they can be able to actually suggest a playbook, a remediation plan, and then execute that, that's gonna take obviously a lot of tuning and obviously iteration to make sure that has high efficacy. But then you can start to actually augment the individual who's sitting in the seat who should be monitoring to be able to kind of use as an agent. So I think that agent component of having somebody who's almost like a mirror clone of the analyst is gonna help substantially to be able to force multiply.
How do you feel about the folks who think that AI is going to take away all the security jobs, or just jobs in general, but there's a lot of fear-mongering about that. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that's the case with any industrial revolution. It's always the case, right? When we brought in cars, right, people were like, well, what about all the people taking care of the horses and building the buggies, right? What ends up happening, and we've seen this time and time again, is that they have to evolve, and then essentially it's a reskilling of education. AI is just a tool. That's all it is, right? What it is a very powerful tool that will amplify the human intelligence, but we got to think about it that way. So will there be jobs that become obsolete? Yes, but there's going to be also a generation of a lot of new jobs, right? And some of them we don't even know about yet. So with any workforce shift, you're going to have to relearn things, and that's where also people have a hard time because it's change, and people hate change. So now we're unfortunately, or fortunately, I like to look at it, is that the change now that we have is occurring at the fastest pace that we've ever seen, right? You just got to get with the times, unfortunately. And the good thing is that we have great tools and resources to get up and running pretty quickly with these new things.
Appreciate that answer. Yeah, I think that adaptation is going to be hard for some folks. Yeah, I think it's necessary for sure. It's going to be a long time before we get rid of humans, in terms of like in the knowledge work. Even with like robotics, it's going to be a long time before you get rid of the human in warehouses and things like that, because we still haven't been able to create something that is creative itself. Like that's something that's uniquely us, that we can actually think and problem solve and create. That's something that AI is trying to copy, or it's trying to emulate, but that capability is still uniquely ours for for the foreseeable future, I think. Even though OpenAI is trying to create, GPT-5 and all that kind of stuff, but it's ours for a while.
And I agree. I think we have something that the machines don't, which is the EQ side, right? And there's this kind of conversations about this. If you look at IQ is actually, there is a limit to IQ, right?
Yes.
But there's not a limit to EQ, right? And so how does a machine understand all these external variables when I'm talking to somebody? Because there's things like neurochemicals going in your brain. You have also hormones, right? You have nonverbal. There's all this stuff. And so there's so many sensory inputs that our brains have to go through to process that can either elevate or de-escalate our EQ, but the machines, they can't pick up on these things. And so those tactical components, while we're not going to be able to process faster than a machine ever, we'll be able to, like you said, do unique pattern recognition and identify things that only is kind of within, the human species, essentially.
Awesome. Well, this has been a wonderful interview. It's been great talking to you. Thank you so much again for your time. I'll ask, do you have a message for the viewers that want to do something akin to what you're doing? What is your advice for them?
Yeah, I think my advice is just get started. It's pretty straightforward. I think a lot of people get into paralysis by analysis. They're fearful of what other people will think, so just get out there. There's a lot of resources. There's people out there like Jonathan, like myself. We want everyone to be successful because it's all about doing something that others aren't doing and adding value, so just get after it.
Amen to that. Do you want to give a quick plug? Where can our viewers find you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find ContraForce on www.contraforce.com. Information's there. We are providing a new way to actually manage security operations with our service management platform. If you want to get more information, reach out to us. We have free demos, trials, whatever it is, and we're here to help, and we'd love to be able to help build your business.
Wonderful. Stan, thanks again. It's been a
Jonathan,
pleasure, man.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's awesome. Take care,
and
we'll see you all on the next one.